Mr. Chavez, would you mind leading us in the flag salute, please?
Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are at item A. We're going to recognize a number of retirees.
Well, we have a fairly good crew, even in a COVID world. So retirees, would you please stand?
Mike, I thought you were going to stand. I was like, no.
So we actually have a long list of retirees because COVID world didn't let us do it last year. And this year we just finally became available. So I want to run through these whole lists first. Okay. So last year, Cindy Zudema, John Haschek, Janice Haschek, Jackie Cannon, Robert Parmenter, Hopi Wise, Patricia Dalton, Jill Walton, Priscilla Dodge, Lenore Hansen. This year, it seems like a small list. We only had 4. Laura Sleeper, Linda Bailey, Lori Burkhart, and Suzanne Kidwell. But these guys are no strangers to the district, and you've done a great job for us. And I don't even know how many years of service there are between just the 5 of you. There has to be 130 years or more of service to the district. That's just John. but
It just seemed that way.
yeah, you guys do a wonderful job for the district. We really appreciate it. Robert, I know I've been talking to him for a while about every day being a Saturday. I hope every day is a Saturday for you and every other day is a holiday. Because we're hard to get here and we really have appreciated all the stuff you do. You know, I tell you, people don't come and replace you. They just come and take your position. Because you brought something to the table unique. Everybody's unique. And what you've done has been very helpful and very appreciative. And I'm glad that you have the opportunity to enjoy some retirement time.
Yes.
And I know that I hope you travel and do all those great things. So Alex, I'd like you to present some certificates to them. Who's paparazzi?
Sure.
There she is. Suzanne.
I've shown 19 years. Is that right? 20?
Zoom sees the podium.
Pardon me?
The Zoom sees the podium.
Zoom sees the podium. There we go.
Yeah, you can get right.
Yeah, my math was real quick. Gotcha. You're welcome. Thank you.
John.
John. Congratulations.
Between being a student here and 28 years in the district, I think I've worked with everyone I see in the room, so it's been a pleasure. It's been great.
You're up on the wall of fame around the hall?
No, that's my brother.
No, I mean in the your graduate year.
Yes,
Yeah.
Really? I didn't know that. Cool.
you didn't know that you took my sister to prom then either.
When I was teaching, I have kids go out there and try to find me.
And
John's
John
at 30 or 31 years.
just moved to
Is that 30 or 31 years
Of what?
of service to the district? 31?
Well, 28 full years.
And Janice.
I don't know. I'm seeing stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, well, sure.
I see my dad. None of
Right?
that.
Mr. Clevenger.
I don't know.
I was looking, you're the last one at the bottom, and I hope it's there.
I certainly have enjoyed working with not only my colleagues, but the students have just been wonderful for the past 23 years. I'll cherish those memories.
You want me to get a better picture this time? Your eyes were closed. Thank you.
Thank you. How many years?
So 37 altogether,
I
but
was
my
gonna say, I
Willits,
think
I started in the 80s.
you were one of the top years for a long time.
Yes. Right.
That's
So
89. Yeah.
I miss the employees and the students in Willits, Willits Unified School District, but I am looking forward to new adventures, and I wish the same for all of you.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to do one big one with those that are here with their certificates for the website?
Sure.
Please.
Right in a minute.
Oh, there we go.
You're photogenic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, let Alex squeeze in the middle there.
Anybody else? Board?
Oh, Alex is good. Go, Alex.
John had a short
Other
break.
duties. Other duties, as
Thank you so much.
Hey, thank
It,
you all.
it hurts my heart a little bit because you're leaving a hole in Willits Unified, but it really does. It's like a little hurt in your heart that you're leaving. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Go fix that county, John.
What do they do here?
He's just gonna take it out.
Yeah.
Oh,
You might stick around for a minute. If you want. If you want.
Okay, we're at public comments, and basically a person wishing to be heard by the board shall first be recognized by the president and shall then proceed to comment as briefly as the subject permits. In general, individual speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to address the board on each agenda or non-agenda item, and the board will limit the total time for public input on each item to 20 minutes under board policy 9323. Are there any?
Mr. Neary has asked to be first.
Mr. Ranieri has asked first. Go ahead, Mr. Neary.
Unmute yourself.
You're muted.
Unmute.
Chris, you're muted.
At least he's not a cat.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I understand this is Mark's last meeting, and I hope this doesn't sound like a eulogy, but I'll tell you that Mark's first contact with the district was with Laura Sleeper when he submitted his application. And Laura was so excited that she drove over to my office to show me the application as soon as she received it. We could just tell from the application that Mark would be potentially a transformational superintendent for this district. And that's proven to be the case. When we interviewed, I think he was the first candidate we interviewed. And he was, as he was leaving, he said he had another interview over in Colusa County. And we decided that before we interviewed the next candidate, we would call Mark and tell him to stand by. And ultimately, it led to a unanimous vote of that board, which there weren't many, but that's perhaps the most memorable to bring Mark in. I knew that we had that. You always wonder when you hire a new employee whether they're leaving on good or bad terms with their last employment. Right about during the consideration process, I received a call from the president of the school board where he was employed, and she told me that that they didn't care how much money us Californians threw at him for a salary, they would match it. So it was clear that he was leaving on good terms from wherever he was. When Mark came here, I told him that the primary thing that I would measure his success by is the reestablishment of the community's confidence and faith in our school system, which I felt had declined. Or, you know, and for the prior years before Mark arrived. And so I now look at the bond measure having been passed last year. And, you know, that's a sign that the community's faith in our school system was restored. In my own family, the whole time I was on the school board from 2013 to whenever it was, my daughter wouldn't send her kids to the Willits High School or to the Willits school system because she didn't have confidence in the school system. And I just in they went to St. Mary's, and you know, I paid their tuition there, and I tried to talk her into bringing them back to Willits the whole time, but she wouldn't budge. Finally, last year, in the middle of the year, the kids were in the Willits Unified School System. And I talked to my grandson, who was at Bechtel Grove after he was there for a couple of months. And I said, well, how do you like it? And he says, you know, he says, that school is more organized than St. Mary's. And for a 13 or 14-year-old, that's a mighty compliment. Then, if nothing else, in light of this bond measure passing, I took a tour of the high school yesterday. I've been going in and out of the high school since the mid 1950s when my sister was going there. I've never seen the high school look better than it looks right now. If you walk around the campus, I think you'll be amazed at how well maintained and ready it is. And I think this upcoming school year is going to be a great year. So I really want to wish Mark well. I think he's given us everything that we expected and more. And I wish him well. And I hope that we see him from time to time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
I think I saw somebody with a hand up there.
We have some over here too.
Go ahead.
So,
Watch run.
Mark Westerberg doesn't get because when Mark came on board, he told us all that he was not going to be the public face of Willits Unified. And that said, even sometimes we would all roll our eyes or cringe. And I think his families, we invited his kids to listen in. But he did so many things. And so the administrators and from the special ed department and I put together a list. And it's kind of a celebrity roast, so be ready.
I'm ready.
We have Mountain Dew
I
to
usually
pass
rather
out.
give than receive.
Anybody? Because that's how Mark did his job day and night. The fridge is full of Mountain Dew. And so if you're sleepy, that is the power of the man. And it's green. So he matched Willits when he came. So there's a rap. If you've ever had a boss so politically incorrect, when he says something you thought he might get decked, sometimes he's right. He cares. He's just not polite. Am I lying? No, you're quite right. So for now, at this very time, let us say goodbye for Mark, we'll shed some tears and cry. So cheerio, yell and scream bravo. We're grateful to you, Mark. We're so sad to see you go. Some of the things that Mark said included, you can't change socks in Willits without it being a problem. Is that true? It is true. It is true, but we did. We changed. We're growing. We talked about people sawing a hole in the bottom of their own boat. And then for the good list, and I know Kathy Crossman is on there, she might chime in. But here's a list of things that Mark did to help us. He worked on things every day and night, summers, weekends, to help us accomplish a practice football field. We did the tennis courts, almost all by himself. The bond, new roof at Blosser and other campuses, new flooring at Blosser, filtered water stations, always made trusted his staff to know what to do at their sites. You were required to show up at work meetings, you guys, even though Maria always did. You knew that people would call us and ask us, and we're grateful for that. Encourage some of our teachers to take the next step into administration, and now we have attended all things related to know our community, drove the special ed van when we were short on drivers. He got to know the students. He went to up Tom Kai Road and he was on the hospital board. Students did not have to stay home, or who had to go on a study due to their behavior. They came and met with Mark and completed their grades after school. He helped us get new ELA and math curriculum. He increased our new teacher salary by about $15,000. We have new ramps at the district office, soon all around the district. New overhangs at the gym at Bechtel. Bechtel Grove indoors got refinished. Science rooms at Bechtel Grove. Prepared a playground grant for Brookside and built with students on new infrastructure. Gaga pits. Do you guys remember a couple of all of a sudden now we have Gaga pits at schools.
Hold for just a second.
Yeah.
Can the folks in the gallery please, on Zoom, please mute your mics, please? Continue.
Helped our sites prepare to return to in-person learning. Made himself approachable to staff members, led us through a pandemic, a fire, evacuations, power outages, and snowstorms. With that, you set up a late start so that we didn't lose the ADA. We started a late start under you. That was a great idea. Had the idea to open school on half-day schedules so that COVID reopening kids could come to school every day. Buses are now called, here's the roast part, cheese wagons. Apparently, that was the quote that the Willits News decided to use. So now in Willits, we don't have buses, we have cheese wagons. You know, about busing, I call them cheese wagons. The normal cheese wagon holds 66 kids. He also got us new environmentally friendly buses, a great wheelchair bus, and a wheelchair van. Overall, I remember the 5 goals you said you wanted to accomplish when you came to us. They were hire good people, help students feel positive about school, over communicate, raise student achievement, and don't spend more than you bring in. And I think we've accomplished all those. So thank you very much.
It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of work. And I told Alex when I came, I wanted to come to a district that needed a lot of help. And you've not let me down a single time.
We're better today, but we still got a ways to go.
Exactly. Yeah, I got you to second base. You guys got to round the other 2. Yeah.
Somebody else from the gallery?
I'm a little surprised to see my sons because I don't usually get to see them on Zoom.
And in person.
My son Tyler, that's on the right. Andy's back here.
Yeah, hey, Dad.
Hi, I'm trying to figure out how this works.
Well, yeah.
There's still a lot of stuff to do. I gave Joe a ton of stuff today. He's got a whole board full of stuff to get through, and you know.
Good luck in Minnesota where it's cold.
Yeah.
Well, it was cold.
It's hot as hell here.
Yeah, it's hot as hell here now.
It's coming here. Mr. Haschek, please.
I'm John Haschek, and I was on the committee that hired Mark, and there was probably 30 people on that committee, and we were very impressed at the time. And it was interesting. As soon as he got into town from Minnesota, or wherever he is, Michigan, yeah. He called and he said, I want to meet with you and lead negotiator, which was at the time my wife, Janice. And so it was like in July, hot summer evening, and we sat down and talked for a couple hours about the issues. And it was a real, just an open discussion. And there weren't the games being played. We were just talking about what the issues were in the district. And I always really appreciated that. And I think that he, had that same kind of MO throughout the time that I was president and he was superintendent. And it was always kind of, this is the way it is and let's talk about it. And it was really, I really appreciated that. And when I went to his office for the very first time, I was just blown away because being a basketball player, and then I see pictures of John Havlicek and Julius Erving up on his wall.
Yep.
And so anyway, I really appreciate all you did for the district. And it was, with negotiations and everything, it was always kind of straight talk. And that's what's really needed when you're in that kind of situation. So I have a lot of respect for Mark Westerberg and Will Wilson.
I didn't plan on a year and a half of COVID. That was not in the plan. That set us back a little bit. The academic goals kind of got put on the shelf for about a year and a half. But yeah, it's been good. We've come a long way, and you're right. We got a lot of ways to go yet. It's a good time to transition, and we'll be in good shape.
Well, we are going to miss you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other public comments?
I miss you, Dad.
All right. See you in a while.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, I miss you too, Dad.
All right. Talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
I'll see you.
Bye.
Hey, Alex, I got something to say if that's all right.
Go ahead, Dan.
I'd just like to tell Mark thank you. And I believe the bottom line of our relationship is as we part ways, we think we both made some good friends.
Yeah.
And I'll be seeing him someday.
Go for a fishing trip in Minnesota. They got a lot of lakes.
Thanks, Dan.
Can I say something really quickly?
Certainly.
This is Mackenzie, not Miss Mungia. Well, I just want to tell you, Mr. Mark Westerberg, how much I appreciate your belief in me as an administrator. And I think, I always tell you this, but without your push and, kind of, you got to do it now. I don't know how long I would have stayed in the classroom. I think, that's a great place to be. I love teaching, but I just really appreciate your belief in me and your support. And to your sons, I just want to tell you, I really wish I would have written a book with all of your dad's one-liners because he's hilarious and he has the best little one-liners and he's a great guy. I'm going to miss you so much, Mark.
Thanks a lot.
So thank you.
Anybody else?
I just want to say one little thing. Not only does Mark save the children, but he also saves the dogs and his current dog, or at least one of them. And maybe we all know the story, maybe you don't, but he went to the rescue area and asked for the dog that nobody wanted, the one that's been there the longest, and that's the one he took home. So I just wanted to share that because not only does he save the kids, but he also saved the dogs. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah. We can do our meeting. I'm good.
Anybody else? Any comments? Okay, we're going to close the time for public comments.
Oh, no, Alex.
Who's chiming in?
I was just being polite. This is Tessa Ford.
Go ahead. Tessa, you'll have an opportunity for think, don't we have the regular?
No.
No, we don't. Never mind, go ahead, Tessa.
I couldn't decide if I was gallery or WTA, so I was waiting for clarity. And I think it's now. So I was trying to think of what I wanted to say at this very last board meeting with Mr. Westerberg, who's in my career. It was a season of firsts, and I started thinking about when we first met. And it's really funny because I'll never forget that it was May the 4th, because Kelly Labus and I were both dressed up as Princess Leia with the braided buns and the costume and the lightsaber and everything. And we were wondering about the impression that we were making on you. But you showed up in a powder blue suit I haven't seen since the 1970s prom. So seems like you fit right in with everyone. At one of the first school board meetings, I learned that you love iced oatmeal raisin cookies. So after another board meeting where the emotions had run high and some hard words were being exchanged, wasn't me, not that time. I made those cookies as a peace offering, and you later told me that they were so good, you ate the whole plate and you didn't share a single one. And I'm seeing in the chat box where Rose says, Mark ate all the cookies. So I guess that wasn't a one-time event. It was a simple gesture, but it opened up a door to conversations and relationship building between WTA members and the district office. I also remember the first time I publicly opposed one of your plans when you wanted to change the math curriculum at the middle school, and I spoke on behalf of the program we already had. It was really nerve-wracking. It was a first for me to present, share data, and persuasively argue for something different than what the boss guy was recommending. Later, our e-board had an LCAP meeting with you where you presented your plan, and we were left wondering what part our members and community had to say in its development. We didn't, but that's not my point here. This was significant because it was the first time we, WTA leadership, realized the extent to which we needed to be more proactive in finding out when and where these meetings were being held and make sure everyone knew how to get there. We were challenged to become more involved as a result, which I know it didn't make things easier for you, but we grew, we learned, so it is all part of the educational process. Thank you. After first getting appointed WTA president in the 2018-19 school year, we started having a lot more firsts. The first time you scowled at me for something I said at a Sanhedrin board meeting. The first time I realized that every time I asked how you were doing, I was always going to get the answer between a solid C- and a solid B+. And you could usually be counted on to end a conversation with, don't worry, no matter how bad it seems, it'll probably get worse. And you'd laugh, which seems to be how you handle a lot of the challenges of your job. So, as a, yes, sir.
You're over
3 minutes up.
Yes, start wrapping it up.
Okay. Okay. Okay, perhaps the greatest accomplishment of all, and most certainly the biggest, the first in capital letters, and may it also be the very last of its kind, was the MOU signed between us this past March. Throughout the entire last year, we were in constant conversation over all things COVID-19 and how it related to education and affected our staff and faculty. Everyone is extremely grateful that we were able to work together. We really did it. We kept our students and educators and our families as safe as possible. I'm a firm believer that our efforts went far beyond just the school district, and we actually helped save lives, even though we can't prove it. It's just that I was one of the, what do you call them, covinoids, and I still believe together we made a difference. So in closing, I'm sorry that we, as in WTA and Mark Westerberg, are not finishing in the C- to B+ range as you end your tenure with Willits Unified School District. But I do want to thank you and remember you for what I learned about people, procedures, and processes, and especially politics in the Mark Westerberg era. On behalf of WTA, we thank you, wish you Godspeed and a safe and bright future ahead. Amen.
Thank you, Tessa.
Everybody's got to do their role.
Okay, finally, last call for public comment. We're closing the time for public comment and we'll move on to board comments. We'll start with Paula.
Okay, well, so nothing's gone on. I mean, we went to graduations and we were just here a week ago. Okay, and so all the graduations were really nifty and that was nice. And it looks like we're ready to go forward, I would imagine.
I certainly hope so.
I know, it's my shortest speech ever.
Robert?
Yeah, graduations. Good job to staff. That was really good, very enjoyable. Thank you so much for your hard work to make that special for the students. The other thing, Dan's helped me out a little bit. So Dan, thank you very much for contributing to the swim team, the Otters. So thank you. I also want to thank our nutrition department. We have some morning swimmers out there, and it's the group that puts in the most yards, plus they lift weights. They're very, very hungry when they get out of that pool. And any of you coaches know that they need to get something in their stomach within a half hour of working that hard. And our nutrition people, actually, it's my wife's idea, she contacted them, they said yes. And so now they're bringing down lunches for those kids at the end of practice so they can have a full lunch. And the lifeguards that are students, they get a lunch too. So everybody's happy at that pool. So thank you so much to all the staff that makes it happen for our kids, no matter where they're participating. So thank you. And Mark, God's blessing. Thank you for everything you brought to this district, and you've done a great job, and I just hope things go better for you where you're at, and better for you and your family. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Jean?
Well, I wonder, Chris Neary was the one that suggested I run for the school board, and I took him, I had one day to file, and I decided to run, and on my way down to take out the paperwork, I almost got in a head-on collision with a suicidal driver, but she hit the car behind me instead. And so anyway, it was a memorable start to my decision to run on for the school board. And I have really appreciated this time to work with Mark. He's been a real mentor to me as far as understanding the school district as a whole, and how to try to be an effective school board member. So I really am going to miss Mark, and I'm looking forward to working with Joe, because I know that Joe's going to bring some things on board too, which I'll appreciate. And I made a big list, but I'm not going to read it because everybody's already heard some of the wonderful things that Mark has done in the school district. But I was remembering Dan's comment that he made a few school board meetings ago that Mark is not leaving the district the way he found it. And that certainly is very true. And anyway, I want to tell you a story today. I had my granddaughter lot this week, and because Kids Club hasn't started. And so we had an art activity. We did the art activity, and she said, well, what are we going to do now? And I said, I don't know. And all of a sudden she started playing school. And she was playing school. She had three dolls that I have lined up in chairs. She made worksheets and then had me copy the worksheets. And then she She had the blackboard and she had a math problem, which she did correctly. She had 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10 equals 100. She had 10 tens. And then she had the days of the week and written on the blackboard, and she had a pointer that she made out of pipe cleaners, and she was playing school and she was instructing her students. They all had a name, and I got the role. I was sweeping up the dog hair, so I got the role of being the custodian. And then after a while, I got to be principal. And but what I realized watching my granddaughter play school, I mean, this is only Tuesday and school got out on Friday, the impact that the schools and the staff and the teachers and everybody has on students, and that the students carry all of you into their lives during the summertime. And I just wanted to tell you that, how much of an impact, positive impact that you guys have on kids. And I appreciate it. Thank you.
I went to Bechtel Grove's graduation, and it was really nice seeing Mackenzie and Maria setting that up, and how well the procession went and everything during the COVID graduation. Those kids were so happy to celebrate compared to what they had to do for the last 14 months of not being around friends. And that was the best thing they did that time. And it was really nice. And then also at the high school, seeing all those, the seniors and the valedictorians and salutatorian, the speeches, and how fast that one went. And I'm thankful that it didn't rain till 15 minutes after it stopped. It was like everybody wanted this to happen. So I thought that was wonderful. So it was a good year and good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right.
I too got the opportunity to witness the graduations and at both Bechtel Grove and the high school, and both were run very, very well. What I most appreciated about both of those events, aside from watching all those kids with smiling faces, was watching the teams of administrators and teachers work together to make those processes come off so well. When one had a bit of a problem, Maria, for example, was struggling with her voice, there was always somebody ready to step in, frequently Mackenzie, but they were, in reading out the information on those kids, they did an awesome job, and they made it look like it was seamless. They did, they had one another's backs, and that vision of teamwork for me is really, really big. It reminds me of a great deal of the organization I came from in the fire service, where teamwork is so critical. And quite obviously, if the teamwork is going well here, that's going to pay off in dividends for our kids. So thank you very, very much for all that you guys do from at every level. Are we ready to move on to action items?
What about superintendent?
Ooh, I'm sorry. I thought we'd already heard from him.
Just heard about him. Just a couple things. Joe and I have created a nice transition plan. We kind of know where we're going. He's got a list of things, and I think we're going to transition nicely. Alex is the only board member who was here when I was hired, and I remember saying at my interview, and I said, well, I just got to tell him like it is. I'm not the person to hire if you want to maintain status quo. That's not who I am. I will run at the problem, not run away from it. And sometimes you have to crack some eggs to make a cake, and if I make everybody happy, it means I didn't do anything this week. And so that's seldom have a week like that. But it's not done. It's done in the best interest of priority and for kids. And sometimes adults have to work through some issues, and sometimes you have to have a leader who says yes and no, and not everybody agrees. And I'm okay with that. But the reality is that I came here with a very specific mission. Things were not in a good place. Alex sat in on the meeting with Chris directing it, saying, you need to fix this stuff, do what you need to do, get us back where we need to be. And so, you know, it's sometimes hard to be the change agent and the person who everybody likes. So I appreciate the compliments and things. It's been a lot of work. It's been a lot of fun. You know, it's kind of one of those experiences I've always wanted. I wanted to come out to a district. I left the St. Helena to come here. I mean, we had tons of money and our scores were great. Everything was doing wonderful. And we built that, but I wanted to come and help a district who needed help. And so this matched. And so community's been great. I've been all over the state of California. You know, just unfortunately, all my kids have now relocated to Minneapolis, and I get to hear on a fairly regular basis, why are we 30 hours of driving from our family? And so, you know, it's not a move because I have to, or I feel like I gotta get out of here. It's truly about just family. It's not the district, it's none of those things. It's really just family.
Really appreciate that.
And it's fun. We're in a good position. Everything that we tried to accomplish, I could have never predicted a year and a half of COVID. I mean, this is my 41st year, and it is definitely the craziest year I've ever had, and not even close with another year. And so we're kind of through it, you know, barring any other crazy variant or something. We're kind of through it, and we've learned a lot from it. There are things to do and not do from it. So we're in a good place. You've got a great staff of people. It's the best district office I've ever worked with. It's a good group of people who care about kids and do the right thing. And so you're in a good place. I feel good about where you can go and what you can do. And, you know, I'm tossing it to Joe and let his personality be different than mine. I'm a lot older guy. I've done a lot of stuff, and, you know, I don't have any shortage of ideas. And, you know, I'm the idea person, and my other folks are the detail people. And they kind of know that, but it's good. It's a good change, and it's a good time for it. So I feel good about where you're gonna go. And I appreciate your help and support. And, you know, Paula, we poke each other in the eye, and that's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
We're a check and balance for one another, and that's what you need. And so that's what makes a board. The chemistry of a board bringing different ideas is what helps it. So you've got a good board. You kind of have a great goals for next year. I said, I'm really pleased that the goals are now EL, elementary reading. We're talking about a fund balance that's in good shape, not, oh my God, we can't cut stuff. So you're in a good place. So congratulations for working through that and living with me for 5.
You too.
Thank you.
Well, Joe will mark my 4th superintendent, and I believe probably my last.
Let's hope, yes.
Well, there's some pressure. How long is your term, Alex?
But yeah, I've had the opportunity to learn from several superintendents along the way. Clearly, when you come into this as a board member from an industry completely unrelated to public education, there's a steep learning curve, and God knows I still have a great deal to learn. But it's been a wonderful opportunity to learn from you, Mark, over the last 5 years. Without a doubt, my knowledge with respect to my service on the board has benefited from my relationship with you. We've had some hard conversations. We've had some really good conversations. And I'm certainly going to miss both sides of that coin.
Yeah.
Because obviously we both get an opportunity to learn from those kinds of things. But now we get to focus a little bit more on our new guy coming in. I'm looking forward to having hopefully as good a relationship with you as I've had with Mark, because everything's on the table. It's up front and kind of in one another's face, and I appreciate that kind of dialogue. And I would argue that any of the board should appreciate that same kind of dialogue. Because honesty and clarity are that's the easiest way we can get things done. Okay. But again, thank you very, very much. I know that I will not be alone in missing you as you head east to the cold country.
I've learned a lot.
So, Anything further, Mark?
No.
Before we close that? Okay. We're going to move on to the action discussion items. Item A, approval of the 2021-22 LCAP. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve the LCAP.
In a second,
I'll second.
we've all had an opportunity to review that during discussion.
I just want to let you know that I had 5 red pen marks from the county. Says they always treat you like, you're in freshman English and they gotta, well, I think you ought to say this, and I think it ought to say this way, and I think you ought to have this metric. I went through all those today. Our LCAP is now completely updated on what we call DTS. It's document storing. And so Joe and you guys have an LCAP for the next 3 years that's been approved and dotted i's and crossed t's with the county. Remember, the LCAP is a living document. You can change things in it, you can move things in it, but you at least have a pathway and you have an approval. So now Nikki can go, yeah, we're gonna get our money because we did what we needed to do to get our plan in. So just remember, the LCAP is a document that has some movement.
Any board discussion on the LCAP? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor of approval, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And we're at item B, approval of the 2021-22 Willits USD budget.
Would you like to do a brief review of the multi-year projection?
Please.
Okay. So the packet that I sent out actually included 2 versions of the multi-year projection. The official version is the one that is in sort of the software that matches all of the rest of the forms, and it says Form NYP up at the top right-hand corner. The only difference between these 2 versions that were sent out is that it was how we looked at the fund balance. And essentially, if we are to meet the 17% that we had discussed in the 2 out years of the multi-year projection, we also have some assigned fund balances in there right now, which are comprised of the supplemental concentration grant, the lottery funds, and the MA funds. We would not be able to submit a multi-year projection to the state that shows a negative ending balance, which the unassigned ending balance is what I should say. So the ending balance is still a good, strong ending balance, but I think the difference is we're trying to show a 17% reserve for economic uncertainty. And that's more than what we've shown on previous versions. And so when you look at the out years, I just had to do 2 different versions, and the version that is on the spreadsheet, it simply allows us to see on the bottom line how far away we are essentially from meeting both that 17% as well as holding those assigned balances for their purposes as well. So it's really just kind of a tool. But the official version, we take out the assignments and we have a less than 17% in the out years. So as we've discussed previously, we would not necessarily make an immediate change if we're looking at a 3rd year not hitting the 17%. It's just showing us that if we don't make other changes, that might be the direction we would be going. Now, we've discussed obviously the COVID implications. There's huge, one-time funds that have come in related to the COVID funds. So I had also prepared a 3rd version. This is just for informational purposes. This piece doesn't necessarily need approval for itself, but this one takes out the one-time funds. It allows us to see a little bit better where our budget is at without the funds. Now,
this takes out the one-time revenues, not necessarily the expenses, correct?
Some of the expenses I did take out as well. So there are 2 areas of expenses that were budgeted into our official multi-year projection that are not designated expenses yet. So we had about $400,000 in one source, and that shows up as an undesignated expense in the first year of our budget. There is a second one that is, I want to say 1 point, let me find it, 1.7, I believe, 1.7 million. That's in the third year. So you can see, if you look at the official version that's in the SACS form, and you look at the third year for books and supplies, on the restricted side, you see quite a large increase, and it's because there's a $1.7 million undesignated expenditure there.
So why
those
does that
are,
show up in the third year?
it has to do with the deadlines for the various funding sources. So we had discussed that we're trying to phase out sort of across the 3 years based on when the deadlines are. So we have a pot that has a deadline in the first year, we have a pot that has a deadline in the second, and a pot that has the deadline in the third. It does not mean that that is the only place we could use it. We can use it as we move forward. There's actually going to be a plan that Joe and I will need to bring to you that is due, I believe, in September, related to the use of those funds. And so we would probably go into more detail at that time as to what our plan is. But as of right now, that allocation is known. So I wanted to incorporate it at some place within the multi-year projection. So those are the only 2 areas of COVID funds which are currently not allocated out to known expenses. The rest of it has to do with what we looked at for the ELO plan, where we have roughly $1 million set for the first year of the budget. And we have it carrying into the second and third year. It's just different funding sources kick in to cover those expenses. So when I did the version of without COVID funds, I removed the one-time revenues and I removed expenses, obviously the undesignated expenses, that's easy, but as well, some other expenses, for instance, in the ELO plan that I think we were doing because we have the COVID funds and we have to meet the needs related to COVID learning loss. But we also have some expenses that are things that I think would normally continue on and would need to continue on. And I did leave those. Paraprofessionals would be an example of that. And there were some other things. The one big that was like question mark, not sure if it was obvious whether we would definitely continue it or not, depending on having no COVID funds, which we have them, so that's not a decision we have to make, is the reading plan. So it's just shy, I think, of 500,000. So those expenses of roughly 500,000, that remains across the 3 years in the version without the revenue. So that does skew it a bit. I just want to be clear about what was included and what was not included. Mainly what you can see as you look at this is that we would clearly be in a pretty large deficit spending position in order to sustain that program without having the COVID funds there to support it. So I think that's kind of the purpose of looking at that version of it, just informational.
And I wouldn't spend a great deal of time with the one without the COVID funds.
Agree.
Because
it's not the
you
reality.
have them.
Yeah.
Now, if the economy goes really bad and something like that happens, you might want to start, well, the feds may back off on some of that money, but that doesn't appear to be the case. In fact, the opposite is true.
And actually, in terms of the ESSER 3, which is the biggest one that has the latest deadline, I believe the preliminary allocation identified is over $3 million. However, there's only budget authority currently on, I think, just shy of 3 million. So I only incorporated revenue and expenditure related to the component of that allocation, which currently has actual budget authority, because they would require further legislative action in order to release the remaining component of that preliminary allocation. And really, you know, what we had talked, Gina and I had talked about related to doing this version and what was recommended, why we look at this, is simply that when you have large amounts of one-time funds, it can obscure structural issues in your budget. And so it's just a good practice to be aware of it and see what does it look like kind of without that obscuring it. But again, informational only, not part of the approval.
This process that you went through here was a recommendation through CSBA. And it was aimed at just understanding the target, so that when we're dealing with one-time funds, looking at what programs might be supported by those quote one-time funds, and not trapping yourself into some place where as those programs become basically sustained programs, and all of a sudden you find out that the funds are drying up. Now what do you do?
Right.
And you don't want to find yourself behind the eight ball with respect to the budget and trying to maintain programs that you simply don't have the.
A year from now, I would look at the third year projection. Because the COVID funds should be ending, and you'll have that year out without.
Yeah, right
And that's where
now.
you better look at a year or two window,
Yeah,
what's gonna stay, what's gonna go, because you're not gonna have the revenue to sustain that.
very true. Right now, the whole multi-year, those 3 years, all incorporate COVID funds in each of the years. And so you're right, when we get into next year, that third year no longer will incorporate COVID funds. And
You know the third year out is coming down.
Mhm.
Nikki, do you anticipate in your predictions the inflation that is all of a sudden starting to take off? I know things are going to start costing more, and I've seen
So
in the past where that becomes an issue for some districts.
the main areas that I focused on related to that issue is fuel. Because we've clearly been seeing some pretty big fuel prices. So I did try to factor it in for that. And also food to the extent that I was able to. But again, as we've talked about, the sort of trend of food service has been so unpredictable that it's hard still to make a good projection on that. But I did try to incorporate it within that. The only area that I did not incorporate it that I've been kind of waiting to see what might happen has been electrical. I've kind of been expecting we might see that go up, but it still has not done that. And so, it is not budgeted for a large increase, but that is an area I am watching.
What about the bond projects in relationship to higher cost of materials?
That was my next question.
Well, so bond, we don't have a lot still in the wings in terms of bond. A lot of those projects have already happened. A lot of the invoices even have already been paid. We have 2 big ones happening right now. And we are doing some change orders later in this budget, but that's not related to those kinds of issues. And the rest of those contracts are locked in by contract at this point. And so the remaining piece really would be if we do something with Brookside.
The only 2 projects you have left of significant scope with this round of money is the west wing of Brookside. And out of those ESSER $3, it's my recommendation that you look at taking out all these windows that are at the high school and at Brookside and at Bechtel. Take those wings out, put in the e-glass. If you want to get a reason why, if you go above, is there a room number for it, Mike, above the art room? 19. Yeah, Mike was in there today. That room cooled down by 20 degrees by putting new windows in it, and it's an upper room. So it really does help the district. You don't have the curtains. You have thermal windows where you're not losing heat, and they actually have a window that opens and a breeze can come in. If you did that at the high school, Bechtel and Brookside, you would not only improve the look, the ventilation, you'd also help your heating and cooling bill. And that is clearly something you can do out of the ESSER 3 money based on improving ventilation. And so that is about $1 million project.
And that would be, so when we talked about those undesignated, the 1.7 million, it would be out of that 1.7. So if we went forward with that, we would have maybe 700 that was
The
undesignated.
west side of the Brookside is close to $1 million project. Well, we're gonna be close to finishing all these other projects at about $1 million. With the only exception of her hazardous waste removal. But tomorrow, I'm on a Zoom meeting to try and get us into this hazardous waste mitigation fund to get that money back. So if we stay on course and we get the money back from the hazardous mitigation, you should have the money in the bond to do Brookside's West Wing. And then the board has to decide a year from now, do we want to do another draw? And lay out the things, what are you going to do next? Remember, you can do as many draws as you want and you can change the amount as you want.
And Mark, what was the dollar amount for that hazardous waste removal?
I have no idea.
Still do not
I'm
know.
trying to get a dollar figure. I can't even give you a ballpark because I haven't run into that much hazardous waste in one site in my life. So we'll figure out what it is, but whatever it is right now, we're spending it out of bond because we have to pay the bill. The issue is to get the money back.
Recoup it somewhere.
Any other discussion, questions about the budget?
What are the outside well, it doesn't say outside, it just says contributions. And sometimes we're in the hole, like $2 million. And
So
where
that,
do those come from?
so contributions are movements of funds from the unrestricted side of the budget supporting programs on the restricted side of the budget that don't have sufficient funding. So generally that is the special ed program. And then our routine restricted maintenance is all on the restricted side, and that all comes out of the general fund. So that those two things are what comprise that. And what happens is when you're looking at it on the unrestricted side, it's a negative because it's within the revenue area. So it's a negative revenue, it's leaving. And then on the restricted side, it shows up as a positive number because it's a positive revenue coming into the restricted side. And typically what you should always see on the contributions, it should zero out when you look at the it's like the last 2 pages of the multi-year. It should be the one where it says unrestricted, restricted, unrestricted / restricted. It zeroes out because it should always be the same amount. You're just seeing both sides of the equation.
Okay, and so then, is that what we're supposed, when we vote to transfer funds or not transfer funds, is that what we're okaying to do?
Are you
Or
talking
is it
about
an automatic movement?
Are you talking about like some of these resolutions and things?
Yeah.
It actually, I think, has more to do with interfund activity. So that would be things like so the transfer out to the food service fund
Yeah.
would be an interfund transfer. And then we also make transfers of indirect costs. So we bring money from the child development fund and the food service fund into the general fund. And so there's money that goes both directions for different purposes, but it's really the interfund activity that we're looking at when we do that. The within the general fund, the contributions, I don't believe those ones require board approval.
So those are just.
You're approving it sort of in the context of the budget, because you know that's how much contribution.
She has to keep funds solid. Like you can't have a massive deficit in food service. You have to clean it up at the end of the year.
And that's what it is coming. I mean, I thought that when it was unassigned at the very bottom, of the multi-year projections, I thought that I understood last week that comes from when you clean up your whole budget and take all your extra money that you thought you were going to spend and didn't have to.
Right, but this is just the general fund where we're looking at that when we've
Okay.
been talking about it in relation to our reserve. But when I'm closing the books, I have to book all the final transfer out to food service, the indirect costs from those funds over to the general fund. They're budgeted throughout the year, but we know that when we close, it's like, what is the final number, right? It's we prepare for it, but I don't know until the very end the actual final number. So that takes place during the closing process. So there's those transactions. And then there's also the temporary cash transfer is we sometimes have revenues that will come in later after the fact. So let's say at June 30, that fund, child development fund or food service fund, it could have technically a negative balance because we've been spending out of it all year. And it's okay because it's balanced against the cash from our general fund. But when we close on June 30th, we can't close with a negative balance. So they may do a temporary transfer and then it goes right back immediately.
As soon as the money.
And I'm booking a receivable for the revenue. And then maybe within a month or two, then the revenue finally comes in, it gets posted.
And it wouldn't be included with the unassigned monies or anything
It should not, no, it shouldn't affect that. It's a temporary transaction. Yeah.
I'm so
Way
sorry.
more complicated
School
than
finance
checking and a
just
savings.
is so ridiculous.
Any other discussion on the budget itself? We'll save the other parts for later, Paula.
Yeah,
Leave
no.
it there.
Okay. Just all tied together.
Can we ask questions or is it just amongst you guys?
Public comment is closed. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions on the budget? Comments? Do we have a motion to approve the budget?
I move that we approve the budget.
Second?
I second.
Motioned and seconded. Any further discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
We are at item C, approval of a provisional internship permit for Elisa Smith, education specialist, moderate to severe middle school certificated teacher.
This is one of our own, a grad, an aide, a parent of the teacher who's doing a really good job for us over at that. We want to keep her going and she's in her program and doing the things she needs to do to maintain her full certification. As difficult as it is in the special ed world to find certified people, even though she doesn't have the certification, she's got every other criteria we want. She's local, she knows the kids, she knows the community. She's been a para in the room before, so she's really a good hire. We commend her for continuing to get it done and get to the place where she can be fully credentialed.
How long does it take for her to meet the obligations of full credential?
Depends on the person, but generally it's a 2-year window for most folks. But it depends on what they come in with. Because there's criteria you have to meet.
So her criteria at this point is not that she's a licensed teacher looking to go into special ed and get an extra part to her credential. This is because she doesn't have a credential yet, right?
Right. That's right, Kelly.
Correct.
Kelly's here. I might.
Bachelor's degree.
No sense
CS,
being in the middle.
And background as a special ed paraprofessional. And so she's enrolling in, I believe she's going to do the Be a Teacher program. And she's got that started enrolling.
And so that's what you're talking about for the 2-year program that she'll have 2 years from starting now.
Right.
To go ahead and get a full credential.
And she has to do that on top of her full-time job.
Right, no, I understand that
It's
part.
it's a burden,
It's a commitment.
but she's very committed to do it, and you know, she's a good young teacher, and we want to keep your own. She's a good one.
Good. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
A motion to approve. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Yes.
All nay. And we are at item number D, approval of a provisional internship permit for T. Ellie Crawford, multiple subject certificated teacher, elementary grades.
This is Tessa 1, or Tessa Crawford's are related. We have two. It's unusual to have a Tessa and you have two in one building, but she is a teacher at Blosser, and she came to us very late in the year. She came to us, she actually replaced Janice right before the start of school. She's in a program. I believe she's a Willits grad, isn't she?
Yes, she is. She graduated in 2005.
Yeah,
same
she's
year
a
as
Willits
I did.
grad. I know her, she's related to Bruce, our former mayor, because I told him we were hiring his relatives now, even though he didn't want us to buy the property, sell the property. But yeah, she's a great young teacher. She's doing what she needs to do, and she's learning. And again, she falls into that category of, we have people who are local, who we want to give a shot to, and she's proving very worthy. So if she were not, she would not be here. We would have not renewed.
We have approved their PIPs, both of these people already once before, correct?
I don't believe you would have approved Ellie. No.
How did we get her on board in the first place?
Yeah, she enrolled in a program.
Was she filling in for somebody who was
Yeah.
on leave?
Yeah.
Was it a maternity?
No, she was
Okay.
filling in for Janice
Oh.
on a short-term basis.
I'm just curious to know, why does this come to us now as opposed to like before we actually hired?
So we may have approved her on a different type of waiver previously,
Okay,
like
that makes sense to me.
a short-term staff waiver or something along those lines.
And this is one where Paul and I are on the same page. They have some crazy ways to certify teachers in this state. And they all have a different acronym. I don't know what any of them mean. I do know that it allows them to legally be in a classroom. And they all have different requirements and different timelines. And these are the ones who are the PIPs who are able to run it. I believe it's a 2-year window. And they have to meet criteria. If they don't meet the criteria, we don't have to release them or let them go. They just can't be in the room. They've lost their ability to be in the classroom. So they have to do their program or not be employed with us.
So a motion to approve item D.
I move that we approve for Ellie Crawford.
Is there a second?
Go ahead. Diane, second.
Okay, I'll second.
Okay, the motion is second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Yes.
All- Aye. We're at item E, approval of second and final read on the revised board policy 3100 budget. This is the one where we're talking about
17%.
our reserve for unanticipated. Motion to approve.
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
The motion is second. Is there discussion?
Yes.
Go ahead, Paul.
I really believe that it should be about half that percentage. I do not believe that the state would set up all its districts to say that the minimum requirement is 3%, expecting that people will fail in their covering all their bills. I also believe that maybe 8 or 9% would be more than enough. This district, just like any other, I believe should be as close to the state as it can for its $2 million account. I mean, $2 million. What I understood last time was that we needed $2 million to get through 2 months in a economic uncertainties balance. At this point, we have nearly 4 million again. And what concerns me the most is that we have a number of salary schedules that need modifying, and that takes a good deal of money. We have a lot of needs throughout the district. The monies came back over these last years, especially because of the government, in this case, Gavin Newsom, reimbursing the districts for all that loss. I believe that as soon as our teachers and our classified staff especially, and all the other departments that are lacking in whatever they're lacking, get a little better up to par, that then we can talk about bringing this back, because it says here it's up to something, you can discuss it yearly and modify its terms. And so that being the case, maybe in another year or two, we can modify its terms. But at this point, we get ongoing monies every single year. As I said last week, we started with a 3 to 6% reserve a few years ago, just as Mark was starting. And it's managed in the last 5 years to increase itself over 10%. That didn't come from COVID. It didn't come from contributions from places where we misfigured what we were spending, but it came because the amount of money that comes in every year is greater. I am aware that you all believe in the 17%, and that's fine. It's just that I really think that the students and the employees of the district are the ones who had been through the times where people were laid off because we didn't have enough money, and programs were cut because there wasn't enough money. And by the time our government catches on to how education needs to be a priority and we get money, all we want to do is put it to the side. And I don't agree with that at all. I mean, I like the plan and idea. I don't like the percentage.
Any further discussion?
I just like to say that that the state average is for reserves for economic uncertainty is something like 18.9%. That's the state average in school districts, and we're looking at formalizing a 17% percentage for economic insecurity or what's it called? Uncertainty. And I know that the 3%, which is the very least that we could have, is only 9 days of operating expenses, and that 17% covers 2 months of operating expenses. So at other groups that I've been involved with, that's what they set aside is 2 months worth of operating expenses. It's just the way to go. This is from Cal Matters, and it doesn't have anything to do with education, but it has something to do with what happens when you don't have money set aside to cover things. And this is from Cal Matters, which is a really good source of information about the state of California. A single paragraph on page 180 of Governor Gavin Newsom's revised 21-22 budget refers to one of the state government's most vexing dilemmas: an immense debt it owes to the federal government for support payments to millions of Californians who lost their jobs during the COVID-19 pandemic. By the end of the year, the state's unemployment insurance fund is expected to owe more than $24 billion and must be repaid with interest to the federal government. The state began taking out loans when last year's sudden spike in pandemic-related unemployment quickly exhausted the unemployment insurance fund. California resorted to borrowing against its UIF because its UIF had one of the nation's most anemic reserves, as the Federal Department of Labor often notes, due to a decades-long political stalemate. Anyway, they reduced the amount of money that they had in this fund. And then the Great Recession struck, and the UIF was quickly drained, and the state borrowed from the federal government to cover benefits, eventually owing about $11 billion. The debt was repaid via higher federal payroll taxes over 10 years, but the UIF never recovered. So they were able to, they were never able to recover it because they spent it. So, and it's just an example, and now they're having to repay it, or they're having to borrow and repay it with interest. And that's what we would have to do as a school district, is that if we didn't have a significant amount of money, the 17% to keep us operating for 2 months, it would reduce the ability that we would have to recover without having to borrow money. And once you borrow money, then you're having to repay it with interest. and which just digs you into a deeper hole. So anyway, that's my input.
Further discussion? Yeah, I'm firmly in support of a strong reserve for economic uncertainties. The beauty of that fund is it does provide us that 2 months of operating revenue. It gives us, it provides us options in a down year or in multiple down years in the future that we wouldn't otherwise have. It prevents us from having to make snap decisions or drastic decisions with respect to the elimination of programs and personnel when we have a down year, or worse yet, multiple down years. It gives us the opportunity to make calculated incremental changes so that we can maintain as many of our programs and personnel for as long as we reasonably can. When, I mean, let's face it, we have a downturn in the economy. We all know that it's not going to be there forever. But if we have a decent reserve, we can potentially weather those downturns without major changes. Unfortunately, what we saw in the downturn in the economy, 2008, 2009 era, because we didn't have a significant reserve, and because we basically did not make those incremental changes when we should, we ended up with a high school that had just a principal and no vice principal and lots of staff gone, a very anemic counselor situation here. And that's just at the high school. Those similar problems existed throughout the district. We were looking at much higher class sizes. We had to lay off a lot of people just over a period of time. And a lot of programs went away. I'd like to not see that happen again. If it does happen, hopefully it only happens in the most dire of circumstances as we move forward. So I think this reserve for economic uncertainties is valuable for us that way. The other important thing I'd like to point out is, you're right, it is a pot of money that's almost $4 million. Theoretically, we could take that $4 million and we could build the science wing that was supposed to come out of that bond measure back in 2008. But what does that actually give us? We have a nice building, but we know we don't have any reserve for something going wrong. If we were to take those monies and we commit them to salaries and benefits, those monies that there do not represent money that comes in on an annual basis, year after year. They represent a pot of money that's there today, and if we spend it today, it's gone. It may take many years for us to rebuild it. I'm a firm believer that any money that we get that is going to be ongoing kinds of money, those are the sorts of money that we throw towards salaries, benefits, and ongoing programs that we simply don't want to allow to go away. If those monies come in and they're one-time funds, we need to be very careful about utilizing them. It boils down to this: you don't pay your mortgage with overtime dollars, because those overtime dollars may not be there next month. So I think that it's really clear that this is the best way to go with this. It puts us in a healthy position.
I just want to give you one thing to consider. In the superintendent group discussions, there are two really important things to think about. We have about a 6-month gap in our supply chain where everything's skyrocketed in price. It'll take at least 6 months to come back down. This COVID world has had a lot of people retire. That is going to put pressure on STRS and PERS to increase dramatically to cover that. On top of the fact, there are going to be less students next year, here and every district. Superintendents are fearing ADAs going down. COVID expenses are going to be hard this year coming up until we get our supply chain. Hopefully the economy will rebound enough, but STRS and PERS costs may skyrocket because they have to pay those obligations. They're not optional. And the only way to get their money, it's like a bond issue. You have to pay your share. And there were a lot of retirements through the COVID years here. And so I would be really cautious as you go through the year and look at this time next year. you'll probably have a good feel for stirs and purrs. Are we over the COVID thing? Where's the economy? Those kind of things. But that's a huge concern because stirs and purrs going up 1% is a big dollar number. That alone is a big dollar. So be cautious, get through this year, and I think you'll see that at the end of next year, you should have some clarity, barring COVID-20.
So Nikki, can I have some clarity here for a minute? I understood that the $2 million is what our district needs to get through 2 months of payroll, et
More than
cetera.
that.
So how much more are we, I mean, when I'm listening to you, I understand you to say that, and I figure, oh, okay, well, we're at 17%, which is nearly 4 million. To me, it looks like it's 8 or 9%. That would be 2 months worth.
I
Can you,
don't have it in front of me, but a month of payroll and salary, salary and benefits for payroll is over $1 million. So 2 months would not be $2 million.
No, it'd have to be a little over.
I think it's
That's
closer
not
to,
any expenses.
I believe
That's
it's
just
closer to
paying.
3 total, but I'd have to double check that.
Okay, I was pretty
And
certain
that's
you had said
just,
differently.
and that's just on the salaries and benefits. That doesn't factor in utilities and other like ongoing expenses that we would have to meet.
Well, we wouldn't have a disaster that didn't already have us with money coming in. I mean, that's not what happened last time. Last time we had economic stress, it wasn't because the money just stopped, it was because the money was less. For me, that makes a big difference. But what I'm understanding right at this minute is that the 17% of our 16 or whatever $1 million is close to $4 million. Because some of these, they fluctuate a lot.
Did you say 16 million?
I don't know, I only have this paper here at this time, but it's 17 million this year. Well, and restricted, but I thought that
So
we weren't
the
using that.
reserve is calculated by taking the total general fund expenditures, which I
Mhm.
believe is in the neighborhood of 22 million.
Okay, this one. doesn't have
Combined,
it quite
so
that high, but
combined,
that's
restricted and
okay.
unrestricted. It factors in also transfers out to other funds would be considered an expenditure. So the 17% would be applied against that 22 million.
Mr. President, I
29.
call for the question. I think we've discussed it, this issue.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Before, when it was just a discussion issue, and then we discussed it as a first read, and now it's a second read.
Agreed.
And I think we all sort of know how we're gonna vote, so I call for the question.
Sounds good. So there's no further discussion. Okay, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Who made that motion second? Jeannie made the motion and seconded by Robert?
No, Sean is key.
Yes.
We're at item G.
No,
Yeah. Approval of resolution number 2020/21-14, Education Protection Act.
Jeannie quizzed me on this one and I flunked. Okay, so this is an income tax that was assessed on people who make more than 250,000. And so this is an income tax that was re-upped in 2016. It was initiated before then, it was voted to continue after that. And so what they did was they put an initiative out there to raise more tax money for school for people who made 250,000 or more, they paid more. But there was a caveat that I believe the only restriction is it can't go to administration.
Correct.
Okay, and it's a thing you vote on every year that you acknowledge that you're not going to spend that money on admin.
It comes in as a part of our regular LCFF calculation. So it's not in addition to LCFF, it is a component of LCFF, and we have to certify and show what our use of it is in order to be sure that we're not using it for admin, and it gets used for teacher salaries.
Right.
Does a district get indirect costs on that? Or?
It's part of just the unrestricted side, so it's not, yeah, it's not a program that we can put indirect cost
I
against.
Googled it. And the state has $4 billion to give to schools.
Yeah, essentially what had happened is we had received some pretty significant funding reductions, and the governor at that time, I want to say it was 2012, they went out for this proposition to sort of recoup that funding and restore it to schools. So the real net effect that occurred at that time was that it kept districts whole, but these funds came back with strings attached, essentially.
Okay, is there a motion to approve?
I move that we, what is this thing called?
Approve the Education Protection Act.
Yeah, education protection account word, yeah. That one.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
This is a resolution, so it's by roll call vote. Is any further discussion? Call for the vote. Jean?
Aye.
Diane?
Aye.
Paula?
Aye.
Robert?
Aye.
Myself? Aye. Now I think we're at G, approval of resolution 2020-21-15, authorization for 2020/21 interfund temporary cash transfers. Which
So-
Paula already got part of that answer earlier.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if it's okay, it's usually easiest with this little chunk of resolutions to just briefly recap them all. So essentially, these are the resolutions that allow me to do the closing entries that I need to do for closing 2021, and then the entries that I need to do for maintaining the budget throughout 21-22.
Is there a motion to approve item G?
I move that we approve item G, the authorization for the interfund temporary cash transfer.
And second,
I second the resolution.
any further discussion? Call for the vote. Jean?
Aye.
Diane?
Aye.
Myself? Aye. Robert?
Aye.
Paula?
Aye.
We're at H, approval of resolution 2020-21-16, authorization for 2020/21 year-end transfers. Is there a motion to approve?
I move that we approve.
Second,
I'll second.
any discussion? None. Call for the vote. Jean?
Aye.
Diane?
Aye.
Myself? Aye.
Aye.
Robert? Aye. Paula?
Aye.
We are at I, approval of resolution 2020-21/17, authorization for 2021-22 transfers. Isn't that kind of redundant? Isn't that the same thing as the one before?
No, that's going into next year. So it's my budget maintenance transfers for next year.
Years are different.
Gotcha. 21-20, I got it.
Oh, okay.
There ought to be a line that just said, let the business manager needs what she needs to do.
Yeah, this is the one
So we
that
can
carries us
move
forward.
on.
Yeah.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Second,
I'll second.
any further discussion?
So what happens if it doesn't get approved? Then you can't transfer money? I mean, you know, I don't know.
Presumably, but I've never faced that situation, so I would have to do some research to find out for sure.
It'd be gridlock.
Yeah, but that, I mean, I can't, I'm just trying to, what is the consequence for
I don't
not
believe we'd be able to
moving?
pay the bills.
Well, yeah, so if you didn't, and then what happens? You know, the state comes and
The
says, we're
reason you
just
have to
taking
approve it
it.
though, Paula, is because you don't just want your business manager to start doing this.
Exactly.
And so
But
in
this
order
doesn't keep a
to-
check on that.
Yeah, well, because it's a resolution now and your board approves it, I mean, theoretically, you don't need to, because obviously we're not concerned about it. But you could say, Nikki, give me a list of what all the transfers were. And you could verify the transfers. What transfers were part of I? So it's a way for the board to not have to do the accounting part of it, but to authorize transfers. And you have now the ability, since you authorized her to do it, to look at them.
Okay.
So we are at transfers been motioned and approved. Item I, correct? And any further discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. Jean?
Aye.
Ma'am?
Aye.
Myself? Aye.
Aye.
Robert? Aye. Paul?
Aye.
And we are now at J, approval of resolution 2020-21-18, appropriating ending 2020-21 balances to a reserve.
And just to clarify, this doesn't specify specifically to the reserve for economic uncertainty or particular components of our reserve. But there's a law basically that if we don't appropriate whatever's left at the end of the year to our reserve, essentially, we have to send it back to the state. So that's essentially, we don't want to do that.
If we don't spend it, we don't somehow look like we're going to spend it, we have to give it back.
Right.
Is there a motion to approve?
I move that we approve.
Seconded?
I'll second.
Okay, it's motion is seconded. Is there further discussion on item J? Hearing none, call for the vote. Jeannie?
Aye.
Diane?
Aye.
Myself? Aye.
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
So we are at item K, approval of resolution 2020-21-12, pupil textbooks and instructional materials. A little more background there.
This one here.
This is from the public hearing.
Yeah, this is
last month.
Yeah, this is the
Social studies.
So I went to the district office and looked at all these books and all these textbooks and they looked fine to me. I looked through them all.
They were vetted by the social studies department. They went through them. They looked at multiple series. They really liked this. Probably nice to have history books where Clinton's not the president. And so, you know, it was time to update social studies. We've spent a lot of money on other content areas. It was their turn. They have 4 major books at the high school. They have government, econ, world history, and US history.
What's the cycle of replacement?
There used to be a cycle,
Yeah.
but that kind of got blown up for a couple reasons. One is when you do elementary language arts and you do like benchmarks program, you're talking that $500,000. You're talking a boatload of money to do because everybody has it. When you do everyday math, all the teachers have it. Those are big ticket items and nothing other curricular can get done next year. So sometimes you do big ones and then 2 or 3 small ones. You just try and balance it out. But right now, science is in pretty decent shape. Social studies will now be in decent shape. Along with this, Bechtel doesn't need a book approval because they're going to use the same book. They're just getting the upgraded version, the new content with it. So 6 through 12 social studies will be updated. So your texts are really in pretty good shape.
And we have that, both of those 6 through 12 are incorporated into the budget you've approved as restricted lottery funds. So we planned for that.
I think that, you know, you're already talking about purchasing part 1 again for benchmarks to add the phonics. You know, that's is it $90,000, $100,000, something like that.
I don't remember off the top of my head.
pretty
It was part of the
pricey.
reading plan that we looked at. I think.
It's pretty pricey. That's a textbook, but it doesn't go through the textbook approval because you've already done that. You're just adding a piece to it. So when you talk about review and recycle and all that, we've been through now in this 5 years, we've hit all the 4 cores. My advice would be is in a 5th year cycle, I would look at everything that's not a core. Art, do you use a book for art? Do you use a book for music? Do you use a book for tech ed, computers? Those are generally books that are easier to do. And you do that when you're not doing another purchase. And so I would look at your non-cores. as your next big ticket item.
So how much of the core content, it's found in textbook is now available online, it's online content?
Well,
It
there are
doesn't
two
affect your
online.
price change.
Online can be, I log in to see it, or it can be a PDF you download.
Okay.
The preference is to have the PDF on your machine, so a child's not dependent on the internet when they're at home. Because they have a Chromebook, if it's a PDF, they always have their book. There's no internet action, so they differ in prices. They tend to charge you a lot of money for the PDF, but it's worth it. So what Mike is doing, for example, with the high school is, they have a classroom set of books. So did you use 30 or 40 or something?
Usually you plan for about 60 total.
Right.
Because you're not going to replace them for X number of years, so you have a slush there. But one classroom, at this site, we typically have one teacher teaching one subject. So a classroom set always makes sense, and you back it up with the online access to the textbook, all the digital access.
Right.
All that stuff.
So that's, the plan is to have hard covers in the room, leave them there, and the kids have their digital when they're not here. And that way, they're also not carrying home a 300-pound book bag, and they have access to it, so.
We have a motion to approve.
We approved
Item
the,
L. Item K, excuse me.
yeah, the textbook and instructional materials.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item L now, finally, approval of job description, curriculum instruction coach certificate staff.
So these came out of those elementary reading meetings. These are the coaches and intervention people for the K-5 reading. And so the plan is, if we can't post a position that doesn't have an approved job description. So if these are approved, we'll post them immediately tomorrow. And I know we'll have internal interest. And so we'll look at internal interest and look at external candidates and fill those positions. But I want to be very clear that if we have internal candidates who do that, we have to hold on that job being filled by that internal until we have a suitable replacement, because my guess is several of these positions would be internal. And if they are, we can't let somebody go leave the classroom to do this position and not have a teacher to fill their place. So understand, when we post this, we'll probably post, even though we have a general pool already for multi-subject, we will probably repost again multi-subject, because we have to look for candidates to potentially replace internals who go to these positions.
And what's the pay for these positions?
We're using our current teaching schedule. We're using our CBA with the WTA.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to
Item
approve.
L? So Robert, item L. Is there a second?
I second it.
Further discussion on item L.
Yes.
Go ahead, Paul.
I don't see on this description for for L or whatever one was, that that they are bilingual in any way, Spanish, English in particular. I really do think a lot of it, well, it continues to talk about English language development, but it really doesn't hit the core of our problem here. Plus, it says on the second page, which is really kind of the third, analyze situation accurately and adopt an effective course of action. This would be one person who would have a particular philosophy, I would imagine. And they would be the ones analyzing, but it doesn't seem to go over how it would be really nice for them to discuss with the teacher in mind, instead of just only speaking with the administrator. On the qualifications, it says need to possess or obtain upon employment a valid California driver's license. And it would like, well, in insurance. And it would also like strong interpersonal skills using tact, patience, and courtesy. And then on the last for working conditions, it, well, you can all read your own stuff.
Yeah.
It's just that I don't, I'm not really sure how
The
that.
EL position is intended to be less than full-time. And I know that when they've talked about it, the criteria is preferable speak a second language.
Yeah, I saw that
So,
too somewhere, but not on this one.
It can't always be a given that we're gonna have that. You and I totally agree on this, that's always preferable. But they're looking for somebody who is oversight over EL, not instructional in the room.
And this isn't just EL, right? This has to do with the reading. I know there's a lot of overlap, but this is also came out of the reading plan as well.
Sounds more like a general academic coach to be.
Right.
And we may be
That's what
using
really
some of
concerns
that towards the EL also.
So
So,
the position is really designed to, you're looking at reading specialists, you're looking at an EL person to help direct EL. But EL is language acquisition, so it's not very far off from being a reading coach. And so the issue is to try and find the right staff to fill these positions. And we're looking at the EL in particular, not as a full-time position, but a part-time position that does a lot of the supervision, the reclassification, making sure they're doing the program functions the way it's supposed to. And so
for EL or for reading?
for EL, not
Oh,
for reading.
okay.
Reading is purely full-time, working on coaching teachers and doing the data analysis. The intervention people are full-time intervention, taking kids directly.
So we don't have a job description for the EL position yet. Is that correct? I
At
don't
least that's in.
No,
So what's listed here, Mark, is one is coach and one is reading specialist. Both those came about because of the reading plan that was
Right, I
proposed.
understand that.
And I
EL is totally separate.
Right, but my understanding
not
was that they weren't necessarily looking to add like a third classification for the EL, and that they may not add like a whole separate position that's just EL, that they're maybe trying to integrate that approach between the reading and EL.
well,
That was kind
according
of
to
how I
that committee, that was their big deal.
right, and that there was going to be also on the EL side, maybe more of a push on professional development as opposed to adding staff specific to EL. So that was my understanding, but obviously that is not my wheelhouse. So.
Looks like M is more targeted towards
EL than
EL.
and it doesn't sound particularly like coaching. It sounds more, although it's got an awful lot of similarities.
Right.
It sounded more like hands-on, one would have thought. And well, there's where it was on their qualifications, but that's the next one. And
Right.
but you can look at
Yeah.
it, it's supposed to be.
I got my specialist and coach and EL person. It appears L is the reading part of it, and it looks like M is more the EL version.
Right, and my understanding from both those meetings, since I attended them and asked, was that the hope is that your reading specialist also makes a priority out of English language learners or language development. And it kind of defeats a little of the communication purpose if you can't speak anything but English. And that's an issue. Okay, so I just thought from all those.
I think that's on M.
Yeah, well, and M has a little more hands-on, it sounds like, and it at least asks for a preference to be given. But it looks to me, especially if we're talking about this district at this time and wanting to hire from within, there's a lot of going to school that's going to be required. And especially where it talks about having appropriate credentials, it just seems like if we water it down, a difficult thing to acquire is not going to be as successful as it would be if it were not watered down, even though you have to wait a while. And there would be solutions in my mind that you find paraprofessionals that can be trained maybe more quickly and not so deeply, but able to do the job. I mean, there's a lot of models that this
I am
district hasn't
assuming
looked at.
that you and Robert will be part of the hiring selection for the EL person. You're
Yeah, I
on that
really
group.
hope that, but
You're on that group,
yeah,
and so I would expect you're part of it. And I know that Alex and Jeannie have been part of the reading group. And so I think the reading group is, not maybe as critical as the EL person, because it's a different population that we got to make sure you have the skill set for.
exactly. But they're, unless I just misunderstood what you said, they're not going to be considered an important full-time position as opposed to the reading person who is naturally going to be. And it would just seem that if they had that additional skill, even if they have to start going to school right away, then you're more prone to success than if you don't have it. And especially where we're a district that hasn't been particularly successful, it would look like we're asking for more trouble or to shoot ourselves in the foot or whatever are those expressions that mean we're not really setting ourselves up to be successful, let alone exemplary.
Can we add wording, something like Spanish speaking preferred or encouraged or something like that? I mean, I've
Is
seen
there a
that.
reason why we just don't require it specifically?
That's the word I'd use,
I don't have a problem
required.
with that.
The issue with that will be, is that you will hear that, you might have the best person who's not a Spanish speaker. And again, that's not my impression of what this should be. You should speak Spanish. Okay?
Yeah.
But if you had a French speaker, would that be negative? Sorry, you're not Spanish.
Yeah.
But again,
It's just that the way I understood it is we were trying to, this position is going to dovetail in with the EL program as well. And it makes sense to me that since we are developing an EL program, those people are going to be hopefully Spanish speakers required. It makes sense to me that we make that requirement right here.
there's zero downside to having a Spanish speaker. There's zero downside.
Unless the rest of the board feels differently, I would suggest that we modify this and make it a requirement.
I just don't like the word required.
And I was gonna say the same
Somehow,
thing.
like Mark said, if the right person comes along, it's highly qualified, but it's missing the.
An integral,
I
component
mean,
of this deal.
But I mean, we could up the ante on it as from preferred in, I don't know how you do that, strongly sought after or whatever, you can wordsmith it, but kind of put it, that's what we're going for. But however, I have dealt with coaches, I've hired coaches, I've trained coaches, and there are coaches that may not be fully bilingual, and they would be able to get the certificate. They do know some Spanish and they can work with it, but they're excellent coaches. They coach the heck out of those teachers in the use of the different ELD strategies, even though they're not completely fluent, because a lot of the communication is with the person to the coach. And if you have a dynamic adult instructor that can engage those teachers, teach them how to use ELD strategies, it makes a big difference. My point is, if you have a diamond like that, you wouldn't want to let it go on the technicality, is what I'm saying.
That's the question is,
Not that.
can you live with the position not being filled if they don't meet that single criteria?
If they're gonna fill it badly, I don't know how a
Well, I
person,
wouldn't say feel badly. If you have somebody who you think has all the criteria except the language Spanish, would you rather the position be unfilled? That's what, if you put required in there, that's essentially what you're saying.
well, but what you can do is make it temporary in the sense that the person hired, you need to go learn. It's difficult for me to think that someone is going to be the perfect applicant when there's a big chunk of their job that they don't have. Okay, I'll be a perfect secretary as soon as I learn to type, that's not good. But what concerns me is, okay, let's say you find the perfect candidate, they're just lacking Spanish language skills. So you can hire aides, or there are already liaisons that, well, they should be pretty busy. So you might need to find paraprofessionals that are very fluent and merely need assistance, or in servicing, professional development, to become quality paraprofessionals. But, it just seems really odd. What if this year you can't find one because it's so late, and next year you can find one, but oh, well, we've got the position full.
Everybody's theoretically, when you're a new person,
Yeah,
it's a 1-year gig.
sort of, except you let somebody go for not doing, well, it's difficult on people to be let go with no excuse. And
I don't think it is in these positions, because these are critical additional positions with a very targeted purpose. And if you're not meeting the purpose, I think if it were just a teacher in your room, you would be able to either move them to a different place or non-renew them.
Well, the other thing I'm wondering
Could be
too
what-
is like, if we look at something like this, we're not calling it a TOSA, and I'm
Right.
wondering if calling it a TOSA improves our ability for backfilling it on a more temporary basis. I could be wrong, but I thought that if you had a TOSA, then whatever position they free up, if you fill that, that can be a temporary position.
You know, these are,
But I'm not 100% on that.
you know, these really aren't intended to be a special assignment teacher.
yeah,
Okay.
because that just
The
means,
intent is that they be long term.
Okay.
yeah,
I'm just looking at, for example, collaborate with administrators, teachers, students, and parents.
yeah.
Spanish speakers can be valuable. Communicate effectively both orally and in writing. Spanish speakers can be important.
And we just hired 2 liaisons
Correct.
who are part of that.
Yes. Um,
And again, it's not the teacher. I know what you're gonna say. I'm with you.
No, and I think that's a tolerable temporary,
Agreed.
yeah.
If Spanish is preferred and we have liaisons, if the issue is that we believe this person needs to have at least acceptable knowledge of Spanish, then that should be the professional development.
Well, I'd hope to see that in a lot. Can we call it strongly recommended? That's not a mandate, but it certainly should eliminate those who can
2/3
say,
of a mandate.
well, exactly, and that's, I want the whole mandate, but if I'm gonna have to fuss,
We'll give you 2/3.
there you go. I
One
don't
question
know.
I have with respect to this, have the 2 administrators that have been working on this project bought off on these?
They are the ones who produce these. I have not touched those. Let me preface that. I have not touched those. Trina has. Trina and they have put those together.
They meaning Maria and Nancy, or they meaning,
Nancy and Kath.
Nancy, Kathy, Marion. Is there-
Kathleen is on
Is there another admin who's been in your group?
Nancy and Kathleen in the primary.
Yeah, and Mary,
Maria's been there too.
and Maria.
Maria
Yeah,
and Marion
Those
were
4 have been in, they've all seen this in part. And
Can I
Go
just
ahead,
say
Maria.
something? Okay.
Please.
Yes, Trina did put these job descriptions out to all of us. I think what I was unclear about, and it could just be me, was which portion or which one of these was going to be the one that dovetails with the EL population. And it makes sense to me that if the the reading specialist is going to provide services for students, as that's what it looks like here. And if they are going to provide English learner services, that person should be bilingual. We have a Spanish population. And I think that that's a way to address that in our district. I wasn't sure how much of this person was going to take care of which part of our
EL plan?
I think the reading specialist is clearly the person that's going to have the most interaction with that EL population. But I can see this coach position also having a significant element associated with that.
Yeah, because they have to talk to the teachers and do the in-servicing or whatever. I mean, if you don't have a lot of background in how to help students acquire a language, you can't give very good suggestions to the teacher there about, here, this is what you might consider trying.
But going back to, I think Mark brought it up, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm just going from experience that I've had in my previous district. We had an academic coach type job description, and we purposely made it more vague, that gave us more latitude in selection. However, we were hiring 3 different coaches. We were looking for explicit direct instruction coaches. We were looking for ELD coaches. We were looking for intervention coaches. Now, they all fell under that job description. However, when we went to look for those coaches, obviously we were looking for specific abilities tied to those 3 different positions that was under that umbrella. So I think, like, when we're looking for the ELD coach, so to speak, we'd lean towards looking for that Spanish speaking individual. Or if we're looking for EDI, we may look for someone who has really strong people skills with the teachers to go in the classrooms. And I mean, there's just different skills you look under. And there was a purpose we made it so broad, because otherwise you're going to have a whole bunch of different job descriptions and it becomes very convoluted and it ties your hand.
And it even could be, even in the reading, there's a difference between being kindergarten, 1st grade reading and 4th and 5th grade.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, you can't just take a job description and pin it on this, especially if you have 3 different venues you're working through.
Right.
And I think Paul has got a good suggestion. That it's what was strongly preferred.
Strongly
or
recommended.
Paula says so.
Paula says it's good, no one will hire. Anyway, strongly recommended. Of course, that's not strong enough, but yeah.
Well, it sounds like that's the direction we'll go. Anyone make a motion to approve with that amendment?
Do you want to make that motion, Paula?
I'm still thinking, no. I wanted perfection. Oh, well. Yeah, I'll move that we accept the job description for curriculum and instructional coach, certificated staff, so long as the wording has been changed to strongly recommend, all uppercase letters, Spanish speaking.
In Spanish.
In Spanish.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and second. Actually, you guys have already motion second. And is there any further discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Did you say aye, Paul?
I did. Softly.
Round you out, I'm sorry.
Okay, I know.
We are now at M, approval of job description, reading specialist, certificated staff. This one also doesn't appear to say Spanish speaker.
No, it recommends, it says preferred or something on that last page. Yeah.
I missed that part.
Well, it goes with excellent communication skills, which is nice because it implies that if you're bilingual and bicultural, you're more excellently communicating. Not, okay. Had to throw that in.
It's preferred Spanish.
Yeah, and I really think it ought to certainly have at least that same kind of wording. And I do wonder why all these things about your physical attributes and your working conditions, I mean, is there a sincere thought that you'll be dealing with bodily fluids and driving a vehicle?
We
Oh,
have some,
absolutely.
there are some standard things that we are recommended to
Legal
include.
requirements.
Is that all
Yeah,
that is?
those
Yeah,
are
the
legal
requirements.
requirements for California.
Yeah, just-
Yeah, you
Well,
have to
that's
be an
handy.
EMT and a teacher
Well, yeah, I just
who's
don't want-
bilingual.
There you, well, yeah, if you're gonna go cruising with my kids, I'm hoping, no, they're dressed and you have a license. Oh, but I do have one more question. This minimum of 5 years teaching of successful classroom teaching experience, you know?
Mhm.
Okay, is that pretty standard in one of these?
It is, because you're looking, and the reason you put that in there is, there might be people who are really good first, second, third year teachers even, who are great, but you need to have been around the block a while to work with a teacher who's struggling. Because you've been on your own and doing fine. That's the problem in the teaching world is that, it's a silo. And, we give you these 22 kids and say, hit a home run and we'll see if it went over the fence next year when we get our test results. And you're by yourself. And so you really have to have some experience. 5 years, you've probably been on curriculum committees, you've seen a lot of issues, you've had a lot of you've had the gifted kids, you've had special ed kids, you've had an autistic child, you've had some experience.
And not only that, you've also gained some respect of your fellow
Colleagues.
peers, of your colleagues, yeah.
Well, so the specialist credential, that reading specialist credential, what is equivalent education and experience? That you've been teaching reading to your students for 5 years or whatever?
I would presume it would be enough that it would enable you to get whatever waiver you need to obtain that
Yeah,
credential,
or
right?
If you've been a Title I reading teacher in Ukiah, let's say for 10 years, but they don't call you a reading specialist.
No.
But,
Well, Brookside is a Title I school.
no,
and
I mean, well, yeah.
They've been teaching reading.
A lot of districts name positions differently than reading specialists. Language acquisition coach, and they have all these crazy thesaurus names they use. And we're just trying not to pigeonhole somebody out. Sorry, we can't hire you because they didn't call you this.
Yeah.
Say an intervention specialist who focuses on reading. They've done that for 5 years. They're pretty.
Yeah. And again, with a coach, 90% of it's going to be personality to relate with teachers, because they have to sit with teachers and do some what's working, what isn't working, what can we do to help you stuff.
Well, they're gonna have to do some model lessons too,
Yeah.
according to this, which is one thing I was really glad to
Gotta
see.
get up in front. Close that door.
No, I just, the air conditioning.
Are we comfortable with the description as it is in terms of bilingual?
Are we gonna fix that to be strongly recommended as opposed to desired?
My opinion is like the other one. I still
Yeah.
think that it should be a requirement.
Required, well, me too, truthfully,
But
it's
I'll
just,
be honest with you, I'll defer to the recommendations of the staff. If they feel like they can get the job done with this. Again, I think this is the position that's going to have more impact on the EL side of the equation than the coach position.
I would
Yeah,
go
they're
with
more
strongly recommend. My experience with that is, and I'll use some of our admins. Kenzie and Marion both are okay in Spanish. Marion's much better, but she doesn't consider herself to really be bilingual. But she understands the bulk of it. She can communicate, but not great. She wouldn't want to sit down and conduct an IEP in Spanish. But, where do you place that on the scale?
Is there a motion to approve?
I look that we approve the agreement filing this strongly.
Do we have a second?
My second.
Any further discussion? Call for the vote. All say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Yes. Okay, we're back in Mark's territory again. We're at the approval of change order.
We have both of the Hendricks changes.
All three of them.
This is the one that the Brookside one on there. So Kendris is doing our roofs. They just finished Blosser. Don was here today. He did his roof inspection and work inspection. They got an A. They dotted every I, crossed every T. They put in the flashings we wanted. They did have an extra expense at Blosser. When they tore off the roof, there were multiple roof boards they had to replace. Unfortunately, the roof board was about $120 instead of $20 like it normally is. But the big bulk of it is to pay for them. They make prevailing wage when they're doing that. So they had to do, that's in their contract. They assume that your roof boards are fine. They're there to put the shingles on. And so this is a normal add-on. We told them, replace what you have to replace, and we'll just deal with it after we get done. So that was the bill. The other addition for Hendricks is they had to do some gutter repair and soffit fixing. There was some rot. And while they're here with their trucks and everything, that's the time to do it. And so I gave them the permission to go change those out and fix those. Most of them were on the faces of the sides of the building. This is the roof and it's on the side here. It was rotted out and they fixed those. The third change from Hendricks has to do with Brookside. When they did the roof walks, they looked at Brookside's roof and they didn't choose to do the roof that is in front of the solar panels. There's a set of classrooms there. I believe there's about 5 of them in that run. From the cafeteria, then you have a gap, and then there's like 5 rooms. That room is in pretty deep, that roof is in pretty decent shape. I went up on it, I looked at it. It's in pretty decent shape. It's not great. I told them to go ahead and redo the roof. And the reason for that is it's $40,000 to have them do it while they're here. If they come,
Go call
because
them back.
when they come back next year, it's gonna be $140 to do the roof. When I went up on the roof, what I saw were 4 or 5 ponding places where you could see, even though it was super dry out, you could see where water was ponding. And so what we're gonna do is make sure they create a slope where that drains off. They call them scuppers. The scuppers are able to be screened so the water will come out. So it's a really good expense. Let's fix all the roofs. That was my mentality is, let's get all our roof fixed so we stop taking in water. This is one that was questionable to do, but after viewing it, they're here and doing it.
Well, they've replaced that chunk 10 times at least, just in the last like 15 years.
Yeah.
And when you first came, they had those big holes from all the rain and messed up those 3 classrooms.
Yeah.
And there's an issue with the metal from the roof. When the wind comes, it opens,
Right.
all of that floods in. And they can't hardly ever find it because they can't go searching in the water. And in the not wind, it's not there.
And that's what we talked about, is
Good.
creating the slope so the water runs.
Good.
Not a pitched roof, but just enough that it runs to the scupper.
Yeah.
Leaves no pond.
There you go.
Because we've had
That's
lots of roof
important.
issues on that area.
Yeah.
But that's why it also looks good, because we've been patching. Let's just do it the right way
No, that's
while
okay.
they're here. And they will probably have one other minor addition on that roof. On Brookside's middle wing is a pitched roof. And there's a longer pitch to the right and a shorter pitch to the left. All of the water and gas hangs on the short side that's a steeper pitch. So there are blocks underneath those pipes that run there. Well, when they picked the blocks up to roof, the pipes dropped down. Well, when they dropped down, it broke 4 cracks in that gas line that went all the way down. So we had the gas shut off at Brookside the last 2 days of the year. So again, while we're there, time to fix it. They're going to shore that up. I'm sure there'll be some minor additional costs, but my intention is we're going to do it the right way, get it done and have it done correctly. And these guys do great work. They're on task. They came even over to Brookside where there's little kids and didn't create a big problem and got their work done. And they're up there every day taking care of business. So.
Is there a motion to approve?
I move the approved change order for Henry's Roofing Company.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? You see the numbers? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And we are at item O, approval of change order for Valley Paving.
So my gift that keeps on giving, the high school parking lot. In that project, what's going to happen is you'll see in front of the cafeteria and it'll run past the high school gym. Then it will turn before it gets to the pool, go down to the portables and out. There will be a cement trough there. And that trough will channel the water from the parking lot off the drain. As opposed to digging down and putting drains that when the water goes underwater. Because the problem, when the water goes underwater, the water goes under the surface. We don't want it to go under the surface. We want it to get off the parking lot. And so in doing that, you have to get a compaction test to make sure you can pave over it. And because we're going to cement, which is heavier than asphalt, H&N, SHN believes that we should put a harder packed surface in there. And so what we're doing is we're laying a fabric down and we're putting on a foot of crushed manufactured rock to make a harder compaction. So they want what's called a 95% compaction. In short, that means when you hit it with the hammer, it goes like this a little. So it will be hard enough to maintain and hold the cement in place. Because over time, that's what happened. The asphalt continued to degrade as water got underneath it. This will allow that not to happen. And so that's the parking lot. And like I said, before the end of the month, we may have to have a special meeting because I'm sure I'll have a hazardous mitigation bill we're going to have to talk about.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Second?
I second.
Okay. So this one is for basically additional $30,120.
Yep.
Any further discussion on the item O, approval of change order for Valley Paving?
Just one other thing. The road in, call it the south entrance, is that what we call it? The south entrance will most likely be paved on Friday.
That one.
Yeah, their final grade is tomorrow, unless it's just too miserably hot to do, they're gonna do it on Friday. That will be done. Then they're gonna work on this. They're gonna do everything they can except the handicap space right by the kitchen. They're waiting for about a week and a half. DSA has to give us an approval back on our handicaps. And once we have that handicap spot approved, they'll finish that. That will be cement. Because in handicap, you want 0 grade. It needs to be flat. Cement will hold that grade better than asphalt will. And so that's going to be a cement handicap spot right by the kitchen. And there's going to be a little dirt area in case we get rain that water will run off in before they pave. But
So the asphalt or the whatever, after it does that, you know, from the school entering all through this part where Carolyn and Brian are doing that deal, it's
Yep.
gonna stop there or it'll go all the way
No,
back to the well?
I wish it would.
Oh, it's not.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's going to go back to the maintenance building right over here.
Yeah.
You can see the saw cut already.
Oh,
You know what the additional cost is to go back there?
It was several $100,000. And we just don't have that right now to do. That would be on what I call next list stuff. That would certainly be a place. But to be honest with you, there's a lot of asphalt that's as bad or worse than that. Blosser's parking lot's not exactly in great shape. The playground area at Brookside is pretty cracked up too. And so those are at a level now where they can be ground. They grind the top and then lay an inch over top or 2 inches over. If they go much longer, there'll be a total, got to rip it out like they did over here. So Those are timing things. The sooner you do it, the less likely it is to be really problematic and the base is still available.
Motion and second, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Bye.
We're at item 13 now, items for next regular board agenda. Talking about going to a 2-meeting schedule. Hopefully you guys can give us some information.
So Nikki and I will get together and look at the calendar and figure out what that might look like.
Can we get some enrollment too on summer school?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm trying to, there are 241, I believe was the number enrolled in summer school in the
And
district
that's
right now.
K-12 or K-11, whatever they call
Well,
themselves.
That includes high school, Bechtel, Sanhedrin, Brookside, and Blossom.
Oh, okay.
Sherwood doesn't have a summer school. The kids from Sherwood, they had 4 or 5 for summer school. They come down here for summer.
Okay, well, Nuestra Alianza doesn't start until
Till
the
July.
4th or so, no, the 5th.
5th of July.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, okay, they're not in your 240 or they?
No, they're not.
Oh,
I have no idea about their enrollment. I have nothing to do with Nuestra's enrollment or program.
yeah. They have a pretty big chunk.
You can get the number better than I can.
Oh, yeah, and if it doesn't come in our first number, I'll call and get the number, but it usually runs between about 75 and 100 kids.
We're hoping it is 100 kids.
Good.
That was part of the rationale of giving them funding, so they didn't
Good.
have to cut back.
Good. Yeah, no, that's a good thing.
Does your daughter do the enrollment? Does she do that? She does the instructional.
She does all the instructional stuff, but they're only doing reading, math really,
Right.
although they'll get reading because
Right.
it doesn't matter, I'm sorry. Anyway, it just, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, we're at item 14, adjournment. Is there a motion?
You want to stay on?
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
You ever seen the movie Reservoir Dogs, Robert?
Yes, I have.
When you got those glasses on at a meeting, I'm thinking like,